Hi everyone, this is Takatoshi Shibayama, the host of the Future Design Podcast. This podcast looks to empower listeners with perspectives on how we can challenge the social norm and evolve with better understandings of philosophy, spirituality, and ethics. Empowered individuals can have much stronger voice and influence in bringing about revolutionary changes in the world, whether you are building businesses or technologies. My guest and I speak about social constructs that are commonly accepted in the world today that's not working anymore, and how to rebuild them with ethical values to create a better future. In this episode, we have Jerry Zehr, the author of Peacemaker's Path, Multifaith Reflections to Deepen Your Spirituality. In it, he talks about how all religions are the same. There's a profound spirituality laced between all religions, but we need to explore it, breaking through the barriers of organized religions and look at the fundamental of what the founders of these teachings wanted to enlighten us about. When we seek the quest for peace amongst all of humanity and sentient beings, we need to open our eyes to the path that connects us all. By loving ourselves, we can love others, and then the positivity will permeate throughout this world. So, without further ado, please enjoy this week's episode.
Future Design Podcast.
Welcome to the Future Design Podcast. Thank you for being on our show, Jerry Zehr.
Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here, and I look forward to our conversation today.
It's totally my honor. So you recently published a book called The Peacemaker's Path, and you talk about interfaith religions. So there's a cross between various religions and how we can rise above these words of religion and really get to the core of everything. And I really like that because in my Future Design Podcast, I talk about spirituality without too much religious aspects to it. Although I had Buddhist monks, pastors on my podcast, but it seems like everybody does kind of reach to a similar goal. And this is why I really wanted to talk to you, because you have a very, very topical subject. So before we dive right into it, could you tell us who is Jerry Zehr?
Well, I would say I'm a seeker, a person being open to learning and enjoy life, laughter, play, have fun. Although it's interesting because I grew up in an Amish Mennonite background. And the Amish Mennonite are a very conservative, kind of legalistic small sect where actually the Amish don't even use electricity. So my grandparents, when I would go visit them, I didn't like it as a grandchild because they didn't have a TV, they didn't have a phone, they didn't have any of those things. But I grew up with this kind of very small view about God. In fact, for them, everyone was going to go to hell. If you were Baptist, Catholic, let alone Hindu or Muslim, you were going to go to hell because they believed they really had the truth, and they saw themselves holding on to that. And there was a lot of talking about we needed to be humbled. There was a lot of guilt, be afraid of God, and you needed to, don't drink, don't dance, don't smoke. And so I carried a lot of shame and guilt and kind of fear of God growing up. And even though I understand what they were trying to do. They wanted people to toe the right line. Don't get into temptations. Don't fall into all the things. What it really did was, at least for me, and I think for many people, when you come out of a fundamentalist religion, it made me very low self-esteem, didn't feel I was worthy, and so it's been a journey for me to find a sense of self-worth, loving myself, loving and caring for other people, and seeing God in a much broader and bigger way than just a small parochial point of view.
Yeah, I understand. And why did you really want to speak about this topic? Because there must have been something that really fired you in your soul that I want to write about this book. There's something that I have to leave a message to this world. What is that for you?
Well, part of it is since I've been in ministry, I went in as a second career because I was in the entertainment business in my 20s, found it very unfulfilling, and I found myself going into ministry as a seeking a connection, and again, as I said, a broader understanding of God. So I've always been committed to seeing that people around the world are all children of God and that we have so much more in common. But especially today, it seems like things are so polarized. People are over against one another, and there's always a sense within religion. I've got the truth and you don't, and I'm right and you're wrong, and there's a sense that people are spiritual, but they don't understand and the kind of broad view of God that I have and how much more we have in common. And so I wanted to write this book so that people could appreciate and learn about some of the different faith traditions and see how we can be peacemakers and bring healing to our world.
Yeah, I think about that quite a lot as well. So I'm a person that traveled around the world, lived in different places around the world. I grew up, I was born in Japan, grew up in the US, and for work, started in Japan. I went to the UK. I traveled around Europe, and now I'm in Southeast Asia, so I lived in Hong Kong and Singapore. And what I find is that fundamentally, even though we look different, we're from different countries, we have different cultures, fundamentally, we are the same. We worry about the same things. We love the same things. Our deepest, values could be pretty much the same thing. And I think it's just the way to express it, the way that we formulate these values or ideas are a little bit different. And then I think if people don't travel enough and meet people from very different countries, and I know America's ethnical, multicultural, but actually America is really America. Everybody formulates some kind of America. But once you step out and let's say you go to Europe or Asia or Africa, I mean, you find that they're actually different. Even even if they're black or brown or yellow, whatever you want to call them, they're all the same. So I do have that kind of message that I want to bring out to the world as well. But this show, I want to talk to you about it, and I'd love to kind of dive in right into your book. So your book comprises of 6 themes. So starting from 1, it's called Theme 1, Walking the Enlightened Path. So let's dive into that. What do you mean by that?
Well, walking the enlightened path is really a part of that journey that I think your listeners, probably people who are listening to this, are on that journey too, because they're already being open to new ideas and wanting to learn and grow. Walking the enlightened path is that whole sense of, when Buddha became awakened, and they said, "Oh, are you, a shaman?" No. Are you this holy man? No. He said, "What are you?" He says, "I'm awake." And I think there is a sense when we start to realize that there's more than just this reality. Science is only, shows one dimension of that. But there are many, as we know in science, quantum physics, there are many different dimensions in the universe. And there's much more. I always say we are not human beings on a spiritual journey, but we are spiritual beings on a human journey. And that's a shift. I think you're right that people who travel are exposed to other people. But honestly, I know some people who still travel, but they have a very closed-minded. They have a set point of view, and it's like, this is who I am, this is what I want to believe, and it's tough. And unless you are open to the wonder and mystery, I think that's a challenge. I have friends who will say, I just believe in science. I don't believe any of that other stuff. It's all hocus pocus, and I can only will believe what I can prove with my own eyes. But in reality, as we grow older, and like I have, and you have experiences, and life is not black and white. There's a lot of gray. There's a lot of things that we can't explain, experiences that we've had that are maybe mystical, spiritual, that we can't just prove mathematically. So walking the enlightened path is the first chapter of this. Now in the book, and I should say, it's set up with 6 themes. It's 40 days. It's really a book that anybody can take. It's not a book of theology. The book was set up so that you could take it's because it's for 40 days, each for 6 weeks. So you could read a daily one. Takes about 15 minutes to have you read my reflection, read the scriptures from the different faith traditions. Then there's a prayer from a faith leader. Then there's some questions for you to reflect on that you can either write, journal, or just even reflect on yourself. So that's the setup for the book, is that these 6 themes, I believe, are in all of our faith traditions. But I want people to be able to read the book, and not be too over the head, but to stimulate them to think about and realize, wow, I didn't realize that the Quran speaks about loving your enemy, or that the Baha'i or the Sikh scriptures, that most people have never read those scriptures. But once they maybe read these and they go, wow, that's beautiful, and I can see how the theme of these about compassion or forgiveness is actually in all of the world religion. The great teachers have brought to us truth is truth.
Yeah. And why do you think a lot of people think that, one religion is very different from the other? And that's why we have these religious wars. We have conflicts in, let's say, Middle East. But fundamentally, as you say, I do believe that all religions teach about ethics and how to be courteous to each other, how to love each other, how to be a better person, and walk the path of being enlightened or awakened in that sense. And maybe there is a expression called heaven, but I mean that heaven could be actually heaven on earth, not really a mystical place that you go when you die, right? And that's kind of what we're looking for, is finding that light in us. And why do you think that all these religions come to this? Well, not all, but why do you think religions come to this kind of conflict all the time?
Well, I think for many people, they grow up in a certain area, whatever country you're in, and maybe they grow up as a Muslim, or grow up as a Buddhist, or grow up in a certain faith tradition, and that's what they know. That's where they live. Most people are just kind of dealing with their daily lives. They're just trying to get through life, raising their kids, earn a living. So many times people aren't even thinking in these bigger pictures like you and I enjoy. We enjoy that exploration, and there's a lot of us who do, but a lot of people will just kind of take that teaching that was passed on to them by their parents, or maybe their priest or minister or imam. And then I think some of the leaders in our countries use religion to beat up on each other, because it's like they use it to say, oh, we have the truth, and if we have the truth, we're right and you're wrong. I think in our own human evolution, our human consciousness, we have a competitive part of us. The idea of being equal, or valuing diversity, is really a spiritual level of enlightenment. And in my book, I talk about Dr. Fowler. James Fowler has his writing on the stages of spiritual development. And there's early on, as you're a young person, life is black and white, and then as you grow in your life, you can see things a certain way, and you stay in where those values are, those things of your beliefs are, to be able to say, this is what I believe, but I'm open to new understandings and willing to change some of my ideas if I make sense to me. That's hard, because that you're holding now, um, you're holding on to your beliefs, but with an openness, and that's being vulnerable. We all want to. We don't like change, so I do think in 2 ways. People don't like change, and people kind of like to stay in the status quo. And then also the reason why we've seen conflicts between religion, because people have used religion, um, and if there was no religion, they would use something else. to justify their actions. It's kind of like when Saddam Hussein wrapped himself as a Muslim and said, we're going against the infidel. Well, Saddam Hussein in Iraq, he was never a devout Muslim, but he used that to get the people to fight against the West. And so I do think it can turn people off because they say, well, look at all the violence in the world. Look at the way religion has been used in negative ways. And so they go, so I want nothing to do with religion or God. And I always say to people, don't blame God for our ignorance and our prejudice and our small-mindedness.
Yeah, I think that when Jesus or Buddha or any prophet that came up with their so-called religion, they didn't probably set up and say, this is my religion, right? They wanted to talk about a path to being a better person, a loving person and being a better person. And once you start, and maybe it's in our nature to be tribalistic. We want to categorize ourselves. We want to have a team. We want to have confidence and, see the other person or see the other team as different. And maybe that's innate in our nature. And that's something that we probably need to break through. And as you say, and once that religion becomes overpowered by, governmental power or some kind of force that governs it, then it becomes something completely different, because the religion itself, the teaching itself, the philosophy itself doesn't really have any color to it. Once the people touch it and then create it or craft it in their own way, it can go towards, malicious ways. It could go for, very righteous ways or, nice ways. And I feel that with technology as well. And I say this over in my podcast, but it's the same. And then in the end, I feel like people are going to say, well, we don't want technology because it's creating dystopian futures. No, it's actually the people are making the dystopian, futures. So that's why I think, we need to kind of break through these tribalism, this, these religions being used as a tool to, fight against one another. And how do you think that we can break through it? Because I think this is the most important part of, the theme of your book as well, is that unless we actually make a conscious decision to say, I want to be more enlightened, I want to see beyond the labels of religion and see what's the same with us. There has to be some similarities amongst us, right? You have to take that step. How do we get people to take that initial step?
Well, I think they have to have that desire. I think what you're doing with your show is one way. We can't solve the problems of the world. We can only do our part. So for me, I've tried to do it on a one-on-one, building relationships, inviting people to my home, inviting forums and events where I have people of different faith traditions so people can learn about them. And I think it is that way that people, when they say, I want to build a better world, I want to do this, then you start to build those relationships. You start to learn. You start to expand your own group of friends and invite others. I think you're right that this tribalism, which is a part of our human development, we are breaking forth, I believe, in a new spiritual awakening. We're in the beginning stages of it, though, where we've had, very distinct religious, but there are many people who are saying, I'm spiritual but not religious, as you began in the beginning. They value, and so I come out of their Christian tradition, I value where I came out of, but I'm no longer stayed in that one framework. And I see myself as a universalist, if you will, a person of humanity. I learned a lot from the teachings of Jesus, but I also have learned a lot from Buddha and the other faith traditions and other readers, other people who aren't even religious, but just great writers, philosophers, scientists that have broadened my view of the world, but also broadened my view of each other. The question, why are we seeing this polarity right now, is because I believe as we have that experience of more people moving to a broader way, those people who are maybe stayed in their own status quo, who felt like this was the only answer, they see this diversity in people changing, and they're scared. They're afraid because they feel like their point of view is going to get lost. I try to say to them, you can always you can be a Christian or a Muslim. There's nothing wrong with that value. Those are great, teachings, but be open that maybe it's not the only way to God. Be open to that. But it's out of fear. When people get rigid, people strike out. A lot, and someone once said this isn't mine, but I don't know who, quote, violence comes out of suffering. And so when we see violence, it's people, because out of their own fear or their own struggles, that they strike out in many ways. So my hope is, I think what we're trying to do is to help bring that healing and unity, is important to do. When any times in the country, and we've just gone through this in the United States, when political leaders wrap their religion with their nation, you come a nationalism, and it gets very scary. So there were some in the United States who said Christianity is our, the main religion. It's all there is in this country. And they had a way of diminishing the other people. And these now were political leaders who were like, wrap themselves in the flag and then wrap themselves in the cross of Christianity. Well, when you put those things together, it becomes very scary. And that's why in our country, there's a separation between state and religion. That's very important, I think, in all of our countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really agree. So just let's move on to the theme two, the power of prayer. So I think a lot of most religions have prayers, and they do it in a way that it's almost meditative in a way. So if I take like Buddhist chanting, I actually live right next to a Thai temple here, and every day for 5 times I hear Buddhist chanting, and it's very soothing in a way, because you get that vibration, you get that chanting, even though I don't understand what they're talking about. But I think that's a way to kind of get into some kind of meditative state to calm themselves. What do you think the power of prayer is?
Well, when I was younger, I thought of prayer like praying to God, trying to ask from my wish list. Okay, God, I need this, I need that, I need that. And God would decide to answer me or not answer me. And I had a concept of God like some being out there in the universe. Well, I've shifted from that, of course. I no longer see God as a being. That was kind of an old idea of out there judging us, striking us down, or maybe giving us these things like Santa Claus. I see God as the ground spring of within us, the well-being, the presence in all things. So for prayer is connecting with that within me, within myself. It's not so much about changing God as it is changing myself. So whether we talk a lot about mindfulness now, and mindfulness is a form of prayer. Now, some people in their traditions, they pray like Muslims pray 5 times a day, or they have set times to pray. But I also, which is fine, but I also think that prayer can be a way of being present in the moment. Prayer is like breathing. And so when you chant, or maybe you just sit in quiet meditation, it's really focusing, centering yourself. Some people do yoga, and yoga as a way of prayer. People don't think of that, but it can be, because what it does is, if prayer is about connecting with the divine, connecting with God, higher power, higher consciousness, whatever your word for that which is beyond us. That is prayer, is connecting. And there's power in that prayer. I can give and this is an example to me when people who are scientific don't believe in prayer, of course, because they think that, that's all energy and mumbo jumbo. It was interesting. I had cataract surgery when I was young, and this was 30 years ago. Now cataract surgery is nothing. They do this outpatient. In those days, 30 years ago, it was a lot more detailed. And I was young, so my eye was very jelly. It wasn't rigid and hard as you get older. And when the surgeon cut and took the cataract, it broke up in my eye, and some of it stayed in the eye, and he couldn't get it out, so he was hoping it would just flush out. Well, it didn't. Actually, the pieces of the cataract blocked my tear ducts. So I'm at home by myself. My wife, who is also a minister, we met in seminary, been married for 37 years, and worked as a parish minister, but she was out going to go visit somebody in the hospital, and I'm by myself. I'm starting to throw up. I'm starting to lose my balance because the pressure in my eye was now getting ready to explode. If there was no release, it could have ruptured and I could have died. My wife is driving, and she has this sense, I must go home. There was something that was inside of her that she had such a connection with me of our spirit to spirit. She literally turned the car around opposite, came home, was there when I'm there throwing up and can't hardly even, I'm sweating, I can't talk a lot. She took me to the emergency room, and everything was fine. You know, there's something that happens, that energy cannot be destroyed. Again, scientifically, we know that, quantum physics, and that energy is part of who we are. People who have animals know this. You know, you have a dog, and you're not even, you're 10 minutes away, but when you're on your way home, your dog comes to the front door or to the window looking for you. They have a connection and energy with you. So prayer can influence us and influence others. There is a ripple effect, I think, that happens that we can't explain, but we can experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I never thought about being connected to another person by prayer, but I do understand what you're saying, is because I always thought, as you said in the beginning, that it's more of connecting to myself, because in my kind of, I wouldn't say belief, but my understanding is that really the divine, you have to bring it out yourself. There's no divine being. Maybe there's a divine being, but it's more about you trying to be that divine person yourself, and that prayer is praying to yourself that you can actually be a better person. It's not like a Santa Claus wish list that you ask for somebody, but it's more about wishing to yourself that you can be a better person, or these luckiness that comes to you, or some kind of opportunity presents itself to you, but you have to bring that out yourself. Now, I really believe.
Go ahead. I think you're right, but I want to invite you that it isn't just ourself. It's when you're also with a community of people, a group of people, that there can be an energy and power. I'll give you another example. When I was serving in a church in Fort Wayne, Indiana, there was a number of drive-by shootings, a number of violence that had escalated, and I wouldn't even know if I would believe this if somebody told me if it wasn't for me, okay? So um, I had a member of our congregation. I just married this couple, and she was murdered. There was a guy who was high on drugs. She was getting in her car. He came over. He was trying to rob her, grab her bag. She just was so surprised, but because he was high on drugs, he thought she was fighting him. Anyhow, she killed him, right? I mean, it was terrible. It devastated. It hit home to us, this violence. Now, there was drive-by shootings, and there was also, just it was this town was a town of 100,000. We're not used to having a killing or a murder once a week. Before, it would be once a month, right, in the city. So now we're having this. So I started and gathered together with some faith leaders, and we started going when there would be a killing, a shooting, somebody died. We would go to that spot And sometimes you could still see the blood on the cement, where that person had been killed. And we would gather, we would take some water, and we would just use this water. We would pray. We would wash the cement or where that person had been killed. And somebody sang this song called Heal the Land. And it was symbolic of trying to wash this. And we would join together. We sang, Let There Be Peace on Earth. And we would pray together. So the power of that happening, so we started with 10 of us. And by 6 months, there was 30 to 50 people gathering on these times when this would happen. And what was amazing was we saw the incidence of violent crime and of homicides decrease. And never again was there a height. When I write about this in my book, I show the statistics. I show that you can go and Google those years when I was there in 1991, 92, 93. And that year was the highest of violent homicides that there's ever been in this city. So I believe that there is a ripple effect, that can happen, that can change minds and hearts, and can even have that influence. I mean, can you imagine if we all in the world really started praying for peace and focusing all on that, like on the same day? It'd be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I believe
I know
too.
that sounds a little out there. Okay.
I
But
don't
as I
think it's
said,
I don't think it's really out there. Maybe we should have a day of prayer for everybody at the same time in the world. If it's midnight or whatever, you just wake up and do it. I think that could really help, because then you feel a sense of unity across all humankind, which we really don't get to kind of experience in everyday life, because now we have these mediums where you can show videos. I remember when COVID hit and people were locked up, and I've seen, I think it was Spain or Italy, people were on their porches, on their condominiums, and they were playing music together, and everybody was playing some kind of music, and that was beautiful. And if that can happen like on a global scale, I mean, how wonderful would that be? And then you'll start to think everybody's actually doing something together at the same time. Isn't that amazing? Because it just doesn't happen, right? So maybe we should have some kind of prayer day or something like that.
well, I think, that's exactly, it isn't just even prayer. Music does that for us, right? Music lightens our hearts, lifts us, joins us together. It's any of those things that we can do that join together in love and joy. When we lift up love and joy, we are embodying, we are giving presence of the divine, of that which is the essence of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And in order to actually move forward with how we become more unified with each other, I always feel that in order to love someone, first you got to take care of yourself. And if you're dealing with personal troubles, there's something that you don't like about yourself, or you're feeling stressed, and there's something wrong with you, it's very hard to care for the other person. So I actually took, in my personal life, that if I had a lot of stress in my life, whether it might be my job or some personal issues that I was dealing with, I would try to take care of first. And it took a long time to realize that for myself, to say, oh, I have to take care of myself first. I don't like my job. I'm treating my family in a way that I shouldn't be, treating them. So I need to change that. So I changed my job. A lot of things changed for me in my life. But I think that's something that we do have to take a, concerned effort to do in order for us to start being able to open to that path of enlightenment or some kind of achievement that we want in order to love each other.
Oh, I agree 100%. I think those are very wise words, because really, in the Christian tradition, we always talk about loving your neighbor as yourself. What we forget, we focus a lot on loving others. But first, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. There's a sense of loving of yourself that we don't focus on. And a lot of people, I think, carry some shame and guilt, at least in our society in the United States. there's a lot of consumer mentality. It's never enough. You have to buy this. You got to look that. There's high expectations. You have to produce. You have to become successful. And you aren't measuring up. So when you carry those feelings of inadequacy inside of you, that makes you become driven, and you never feel like your soul is being fed. And how do we find ways of feeding our soul? It is about loving ourselves. There's a wonderful book called The Untethered Spirit. And again, I write about this, about inner peace, in my book. And this was an instrumental for me. This book, The Untethered Spirit, was first, Oprah said this was one of the best books that changed her life. So I'm like, okay, I love Oprah, so I read this book. And the author of The Untethered Spirit talks about how we listen to all this within our brain. We have people who tell us advice, but we listen more to the critic in our, and it's the voice inside of us that says, oh, you can't do that. Oh, why are you doing this? You're doing things. You need to do this, da, 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 da. And it's this voice that comes maybe from our parents or from somebody else that is almost, if we describe that voice as a person, it would be this hard, critical, judgmental person, right? And if it would be a person out there, we'd say, oh, get away. I don't want anything to do with you. But because it's inside of us, we listen to that voice. We give that voice more credence than we do a therapist or somebody as a friend. We might listen to our friend and they say, hey, you need to do some things to take care of yourself or get a job. But inside we're going, oh, I can't do that. Oh, they think that I'm this, but I know that I'm really not going to be able to do it, or I just haven't done enough yet. And that voice inside, that critic voice, is there, and we let it stay in our brain rent free. So part of it is we need to change, and we have the power to change what our thoughts are. We have the power to retrain ourselves. So like when people would give me a compliment, and I used to do it, I'd go, oh, that's okay. It's no big deal, right? I mean, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to sound like I'm prideful and say, and now I go, when somebody gives me a compliment, well, thank you. And I take that in. Oh, that's nice. You said you liked my book. Rather than, oh, well, it's no big deal. I mean, I wrote a book, but who's going to read my book? Nobody's going to read it. Well, maybe only 20 people will buy my book, but 20 people will maybe like it. So I think that's a powerful thing for people to think about. And I just want your listeners to think about when maybe they're alone, what is that voice saying to them inside? And knowing that you can retrain that. So when I would start to have negative thoughts, like I'll get done with my interview with you and I go, oh, I should have said that. Oh, I didn't do that very well. I'll say, no, don't even give that airtime. I did the best I could. In fact, I enjoyed it. It was fun. And we can feed our soul with different thoughts.
Yeah. I had an episode with Jonathan Trowan, and the title was A New Pathway to Success. And we talk exactly about that. We talk about, we always measure or compare ourselves with people around us, or in the news, or people in the media saying this is a person who's successful. This is Jeff Bezos. He's a multi-billionaire. We have to be that. If you're not an entrepreneur, you're not going to get there. It's all these kind of really far away goalposts that we have as a standard, which is completely unachievable. And it's always this relative value that we kind of look at ourselves and say, how am I measuring up to this person or that person? And it makes us really, really dissatisfied, unhappy in that sense, right? And we have to start thinking about the absolute value of ourselves. How are you absolutely happy about yourself? And that's something that you only see when you actually look at your own life and think about the positives and the negatives of your life. And if you want to make your life positive, then deal with the negatives first, and deal with that first before you go to the positive, because there's so many teachings out there. Focus on positivity, be positive, be positive, be positive. But if you don't deal with your negative life, you can't be positive, because you're still going to drag that negativity across. So two things for me is, think about absolute value of yourself, and then deal with your negativities first. And I think that's kind of the pathway to loving yourself, which is the theme 3 of your book. And, I should have said that in the beginning, but, and then, I think that the next step that you talk about is the actions and impact. So can you dive into that a little bit more? Is it that you want, so once you love yourself, what do you do next? Is that the theme?
Well, and I think you're right, though, that once we have to find meaning in our life, we have to find ways to feed our soul, and that's so important. When I was in the entertainment business, I was out in LA. I had done 50 musicals and dramas. I performed, sang on the Johnny Carson show. I performed in all this different things, but I thought it was going to bring me fame and fortune, but inside I was empty. Inside I was empty. And I was drinking a lot. I was going out. I was medicating my own depression, my own sense of emptiness. And that's when I had to get out of that life. It's like some people are in a job that they just are miserable in, but the money's so good that they say, I can't leave. But if it's killing your soul, you have to find a new way. And so that's when I began on the spiritual journey of finding a way. And I found such fulfillment when I was helping other people. I loved being journey with people and sharing with them on the spiritual journey. And so, I'm not a millionaire in money, but I'm a millionaire in blessings. My life has been so rich. I have so many people who have impacted me, and I feel so full of goodness and love of life. And so I think you're right that when we look at caring for ourselves, and then we have something to give somebody else. And then that's the actions and impact, or, sometimes we use the words karma. And karma is the same teaching that Jesus had in you reap what you sow. Jesus says you reap what you sow. What you put out there will come back to you. A karma is that same principle in Buddhism and Hinduism. We see that principle as a kind of universal law that I believe is there, and that begins with your thought. Because your thought shapes into your actions become your character shapes your future into your destiny. And so what do we want to manifest? What do we want to bring into the world? And that happens by what we read, what we put in. I'm very sensitive to how much news I watch, because when you listen to the news, the world is going to hell. If you just listen to news, you think, my gosh, I better just, shoot myself because it's terrible. But it isn't that way. Actually, I have and there's a website called Good News Network. And I go to that website, and they have all these wonderful stories of people doing things around the world. Now, we never hear those stories on the news, because the news is always about slash and trash, and they love, the burning. People want to know all about what's terribly going on. And it's okay. We need to hear a little bit about that. But how much do I want to let my soul and my mind and my brain get flooded with that? So I watch how much I listen, how much I read on those terms. I want to be educated. I want to know what's going on in the world, but I don't want, they say people watch TV 6 hours a day. There are some people who that's all they listen to, is the stock market and news. Well, anyway. So I think that's the beginning of thinking about a law of attraction. What do we want to manifest? And it will come back to us.
Yeah, I've actually cut down quite a lot of news reading as well. especially during the pandemic, because all I see is like how many thousand people are getting COVID and dying and all these things. I just really limit to myself with like economic news. But then again, it has a lot of negative news out there as well. So I don't even know what to watch anymore these days. So I understand that putting in negativity or being around the people who are always negative also is something that really, hurts your soul as well. So, I try to make an effort to step back and try to be more positive around people who are negative, and try to bring that out to them so that they could allow them to feel maybe there is some positive things that I can do or I can feel about this day. These days, especially because I'm in business, I feel that a lot of our relationship has become so transactional. It's like, how can I benefit this person? How can I give more value to this person? But it's not really about that, right? It's about human connection. So I run a sales job, so I want to be, as friendly as possible to the person without thinking about, can I get something in return? How can I get more fees out of this person, right? So, for all the business people out there, they're probably thinking that is mumbo jumbo. But the thing is, because they have to, hit those quotas, right? So obviously, but I think, when you build that human connection, you can actually create, a business relationship at the same time. I mean, that's even better because that's a long lasting relationship rather than looking at just numbers and say, okay, yes, no, to these people. So, I think that, we just become way too logical in our thinking that, we don't really show ourselves. We're not genuine enough to other people so that, and expose ourselves to let other people like us or hate us. It doesn't matter. But to me, it's like showing who I am is a lot more important than, faking myself for that extra money, if you know what I mean.
I think you're right, because actually people can tell when people can sense it, they can feel it when it's not authentic, when it's not real. And I think you're right. There's a lot of transactional relationships, and but when somebody genuinely feels like you care about me and I can care about you, it's a win-win. We have all these terms, win-win, how to be positive. Actually, these are very deep spiritual truths about loving yourself and loving another. And when we honor ourselves and honor another person, they feel listened to, valued. It's the same way when somebody tries to close somebody on a deal, and I mean, they don't even really care about the person or if they need it. They just know, I'm going to close you because I'm a good salesperson, and then I go away. Okay, you can play that game, but I guarantee you, you think, oh, I made a lot of money this month and this year, but then I want to talk to you about, how are you feeling inside? How is your heart, your mind, and yourself? And some people can be cut off from that. They can just be cut off from their emotions and their soul, but they become very superficial. They become very hardened. And I would suggest you're missing out on so much of life when you do that. Yes, there are some people who will go through life that way and they'll be fine because they don't know anything more. It's the same way as maybe when you just eat certain foods, and you think, well, that's the way it is. That's what I grew up with, eating meat and potatoes and corn. Boom, boom, boom. But then you started eating some other different foods from other friends, and you go, I never knew sushi could be good. I mean, I always thought sushi was something silly, or I never knew, this food, and our palate is expanded. Our food palate is expanded, and I think that's also spiritually in life, the same way. Life is rich with so many different dimensions. It's so much more than just um, money and some type of material items you have.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I totally agree with that. And I think that everybody thinks that happiness is something that falls upon you, or it's like the kind of goal that you try to achieve. But when you're really present, you really do understand that there's a lot of things that, can create happiness. Even small 5-minute conversations with a random person can create that kind of happiness in everyday life. And I think that it's the aggregation of those small happy moments that gives you that fulfillment in life. And I think a lot of people forget that and say, if I make $1 million, I'll be happy. Or if I get on the front page news on, because I become rich and famous or something, that gives them happiness. Or, if I get that huge amount of bonus at the end of the year, I'll be happy. It's not something far away that creates you happiness. It's the everyday thing that you're present and you're enjoying life. That what makes you happy. And I think a lot of people don't know that. And I don't think that, I don't know if religion actually teaches you that creates happiness. But I feel that that's always kind of missing from everybody's mind. And you say, okay, I'm just gonna live for the weekends, or I'm gonna live for that vacation, and I'm just gonna suffer all the way until then. And I just feel like you're just missing out the entire, like 90% of your waking life is misery until you get that vacation, or 5 days of the week you're in misery until you get that weekend. I mean, that's such a waste of life.
But I do think, in fact, all of our major religions do speak about that. They speak about the sense of being connected to the divine, and that which is so much more than material things. And part of it is, when I was in my 20s, I wanted to get out of college. I wanted to go to LA. I wanted to, because I was so driven, because I was so insecure inside of myself. I didn't have any self-confidence. I mean, I had self-confidence as a performer, but I didn't believe in myself enough, and I sought other people's affirmation. And so I was out there wanting to prove myself, and becoming successful. And boy, that's so fleeting. I remember talking to this famous actor. I'm 23 and he is 66, my age. and I remembered asking him, well, now you're at the height of your life. You've got to be just like happy. And he looked at me kind of with saddened eyes, and he said, once I got here, it wasn't what I thought it was. It was more fun on the journey. I mean, here he was, and he had all the money, but he had been divorced a couple times. He just transactional people wanted to be around him because he had a lot of money and influence. He didn't really know who his really friends were. And his life, he was living by himself. And it was part of the reason why I started seeking a life. And, people can be salespeople, people can be business people, but you look at I think of people who have flourished, people in their 60s, and those are people who said, I loved what I was doing. I found meaning in my life. People who are happy. When I was in my 35, I finally started, seeking this. And I sought some people who were older men who would mentor for me and who had greater wisdom, because I wanted to learn from them. Because when I was 28, I thought I knew everything because I was pretty arrogant, kind of in that way. But I realized as I got a little older, gee, I want to listen. I want to learn from others.
Yeah, I totally really value what your senior said at that point when he said, I enjoyed the journey more than my achievement at the end. And I think that really speaks to exactly what I was saying, is if you don't enjoy the moment up until you get there, you can't look back and say, I enjoy the whole thing, I'm super happy, right? Because in a way, he didn't enjoy the way up there either, in some way, right? Because he got divorced and he was alone and all that stuff, and once he got there, he had all this money, influence, but he's not happy. And it's just very, in a way, I hate to say it like this because it sounds a little disrespectful, but it's kind of a typical like Uncle Scrooge kind of thing, right? Because he's rich but he's like lonely, and you don't want to be like that. And I think that in order for you to really not be that person, or I would say like to try to really seek happiness, is in every day you try to find something that you could be happy about, and you have to seek for that. And I just feel like that is really some. If everybody feels happy in everyday life, why can't you be happy with other people too? All right. And you speak about the polarization and all these things. If you can't find happiness in your everyday life, of course you're not going to be nice to other people as well, because you're not happy. All right. So I feel like that is something that we should strive for every day. Is like, let's just live today like it's, I wouldn't say like it lasts, but like that means something. Every day means something. Not I'll suffer today, but I'll be happy tomorrow kind of mindset. And yeah, go ahead.
No, I think you're right, and I mean it's easy to say and it's hard to do for all of us. Um, maybe, and especially type A personalities, people who are more driven, and it's good to be driven. It's good to have, things that you want to achieve, you want to try to do and live, and have something exciting that you're looking to. But if you're always looking to the future and not just enjoying today, yeah, then it's like um, you're missing out. You're missing out. So, and it's interesting because Jesus spoke so much about this, and I think first off, I'll go back a little bit and to say, um, you know, and you made reference to this that Jesus, his teaching, he had no intentions of starting a whole new religion, right, of Christianity. That was Paul and the writers who then shaped Jesus's teachings into a religion. Jesus was about helping people come to understand that the kingdom of God is at hand. And so when they would ask him about the hereafter and that and so much of Christianity, at least, people are like, well, you have to get saved to go to heaven. Like heaven is the most important thing. And I'll always say, well, you're focusing on the teachings of the church, but if you look at Jesus's teachings, he said the kingdom of God is at hand. The kingdom of God, the translation is within you. And when he would do the Lord's Prayer, that thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That the kingdom, which was heaven on earth, the kingdom was goodness and love and beauty and joy. He was saying it's here. Don't focus so much on the afterlife, which is honestly, none of us know what's there. We know out of our own faith, and we have faith and hope for that. But I would say it's even more is that Jesus and Buddha and the teachings of all the great teachers were saying, enjoy the present, the kingdom. Open up that you can create heaven or create hell on earth. And some people do create hell on earth. They've had experiences, unfortunately, terrible experiences in their life, and they've just gotten so stuck in those that they've never wanted to grow to maybe through counseling or reading or coaching to come and they get stuck in the pain and the brokenness in their life, and they just stay there and they don't move beyond. And so part of the spiritual journey, walking the enlightened path, is about opening ourselves up to learning, to letting go of some of the past, bringing healing, and being present in the moment. So I think that's, I just appreciate your whole comment about happiness, and this is a spiritual truth, I think, about being aware of the presence of God's presence here.
Yeah, I have nothing really to add to that, and I think it's a great way to close this show because, yeah, again, this is exactly what I really thought that is the the truth in a way, that we are actually here not because of trying to go to hell or heaven or anything. We're actually here, and we only know what's life is here, and if you don't make this life a heaven, then we don't even know where we're going to. So if you don't make this heaven, there's no point. So, I think that this is, a really enlightening, conversation that I had with you. I really thank you very much for your time. And once I go through the book, I would love to have a chat with you on more deeper topics that you write about. So thank you very much for your time today.
Well, thank you. And, the Peacemaker's Path, Multifaith Reflections to Deepen Your Spirituality. You can get that on Amazon or Broadleaf. You can go to my website, jerryzehr.com. And if you want to contact me, there's a way to contact me. I'd love to, any of your listeners, if they want more conversation, if people want me to do speaking and do Zoom calls with groups. I love talking about this. I think this is important. I want to help people find ways of being peacemakers and bringing unity and healing. And so, any way that any of your listeners who can use me as a resource and or my book, please do. Thank you for and the work you're doing. I hope that people have enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to future conversation with you as well.
Thank you very much.
Hi, this is your host Takatoshi Shibayama. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Now, if you enjoyed or disliked this show, please let me know by writing in the comment section. The only way I can improve or add value to you is through your voices. If there are any topics that you would like me to pick up, please also let me know in the comments. I'd love to start chatting with you all. And if you would like to continue watching the show, please subscribe. Thank you.